goofy voice for radio, some people say, and I've got the face to match it, so it's just fine. We've got my background up on the screen here. So a lot of time for me, my career has been spent in manufacturing operations as a small business owner for several years in sales and marketing operations and in IT. Across all of those things, like Jen kind of spoke to a little bit before, you know, processes are at the core of everything. And having been a part of these different, silos, if you will, throughout various businesses, it's apparent. Processes are key to everything. They drive everything. Once you understand the processes and your requirements, then you're cooking with gas. So it all centers around continuous improvement for me. So let's take a look here. What we're going to be talking about today, specifically, like Jen had said, is giving our users the ability to customize their own user interface via a bunch of really cool tools. So sometimes profile-specific page layouts and permission sets alone don't really give users the flexibility they want or require. And as an admin, which I am, it can be hard to create an environment that meets the needs of a diverse set of folks, right? So you may find that there are users that think there's too much information that clutter things up, and then there are folks that love having as much information shown to them as possible. I'm one of those, guilty. And then there are those folks that are fine with whatever. So on this slide is what I call it's just a typical originating distribution of support. So a lot of my career was spent in continuous improvement, and so change management was a big part of that. And this is a pretty typical distribution. So you have 10% of folks that are advocates of change, 10% of folks that are just you know what, I don't want anything to do with change. And then you'll have 80% of folks that are really neutral. They're like, whatever, it's fine with me if we do this forever or we change, I don't care. I found that this distribution is really similar to that observed when studying how a sizable group of users that's been given the same elements of a user experience react to said user experience. So 10% of users are advocates or promoters or really enjoy their existing environment. 10% would change it maybe significantly if given the opportunity, and 80% are neither for or against, or like whatever. So how can we manage user experience scenarios like that? How can we create custom interfaces that meet the needs and wants of our user base without ending up with dozens and dozens of profiles or permission sets? By giving them the ability to show or hide predefined groups of fields as they see fit. That's how I'm going to explain this scenario today anyways. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover with you guys how we use custom fields placed on Visualforce pages, on Visualforce tabs to trigger process filter processes that invoke and pass variables to flows that assign or unassigned permission sets that when triggered will show or hide fields on any object, thusly giving users the ability to customize their user interface as they see fit. I scripted that out. That's an entire sentence, and that's a crazy bunch of words. So let's take a step back from this, all right? So let me move over here. This is what your users are going to see at the end of this process. They're going to navigate to their profile page. They're going to click on a custom tab. I call it toggle fields. They're going to check or uncheck a box, and they're going to click save, and that's done, right? So if I were to put that into a nice little map here, I like to use this. It's a website, elements.cloud. If you haven't ever seen it before, it's fantastic. If you've never tried process mapping before, or if you've been frustrated with the complexity of some process mapping tools, this is fantastic. It's super intuitive, very quick, and it's free. So there, we just took away all of your excuses for not jumping into process mapping. So here's what the user side of this looks like. Navigate, toggle on or off, hit save, and then bang, the fields are shown or hidden per the selections made, right? For the admin side, for building stuff out, it looks a little different. Here's what that whole big run-on sentence that I just said looks like in a process. I should note that I'm going to, along with when the link goes out for this, there's going to be these maps you're going to have access to. If you want access to these maps to walk through anything that we cover today, you got it, along with kind of a script for what I'm going to be saying, because there's a lot of information. So I know that there are other ways that users could show or hide fields, but this presentation is more about explaining how we can give all or a subset of users the ability to access things in Salesforce on demand. If nothing else, I want to get those creative gears turning in your heads. So while this scenario may or may not be applicable to your specific situation, perhaps some variant of it will be. So, all right, before anything else, we need to prep for automation, right? We can't just jump in and start building stuff. We need to make sure that we've got an environment that's conducive to that. So let's go all the way back up here. I just hit the top level button on Elements, and I think actually we've got a couple of Elements experts in here on the call as well. Thanks for joining us, guys. If you want your own stuff, the last thing I'll say about it, elements.cloud. Go there, check it out. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to change our page layouts and edit profiles. So we got to get our records ready for user control. The process of hiding fields from the page layout is in and of itself sufficient. For those clutter-free purists out there, though, we got to remove the entire sections. Otherwise, we'd just be telling our users to hit the hide, button on the records until such time that they like to get the information again or see it again. So leveraging Salesforce's hide it if it's empty page layout section behavior. So for those of us that have worked in page layouts before, we know that if we remove all the fields, the entire section, including the section header, is hidden. So we're going to leverage that along with this. So first, we need to decide which fields we'd like to give our users the ability to show or hide on demand. In here, let me show you. As you can see, I'm logged in. This is just a Winter 17 dev org that I've got going here. Here is the solution that I'm talking about. This is the tab, and here are the different groupings of fields. And this is as slick as it is for your users. I'm going to select which ones I want to show, which groupings, and I'm going to hit save. I go over back to my account record. And guess what? It shows me all of these different things. But I got to have things in groups, and I've got to be organized before I can get to that point. So not to take any more time than is necessary with the kind of lower level stuff for admin stuff. If you're not familiar with how to edit page layouts or create custom fields, ping me afterwards. I'd more than happily walk you through that, or else just send you to a trail and show you where to do that kind of stuff. So remember, because we're going to be leveraging that hide it if it's empty thing from Salesforce here, if you leave even one field inside of a section that's not going to be hidden or shown, then that's not controlled, that is, by those toggle switches that I just showed you, the checkboxes over here, then the section is not going to be hidden. So you need to make sure that only the things that you want your users to be able to see or hide on demand are in these sections. So after we've done this, we need to, after we've sorted all of our fields and we've kind of grouped them together in our page layouts, we have to remove access to them by default, and we're going to do that at the profile level. So we log in, we look for these fields which are on the account records, on the account object, and I'm going to take away read access to users of a specific profile. So this user, my profile test, they're using a profile test profile as well. I just named it that. And so I went into that profile, I unchecked all the read checkboxes, and so that's what's happening over here. When I check this, then that whole big long thing happens, and permission set is granted to the user that checks or unchecks those boxes. Sorry, checks those boxes, and I hit save, and then I get to see them. I uncheck them, I hit save, I go back over here, they're gone. That's because it's taking away the permission set that re-granted that read access to those fields. Now it could be 2 fields in every section like I've got here. It could be 50 fields, or it could be to specific records, or it could be to anything that you can control with the permission set, right? In any case, in order to be able to control things at the level that we need to, we're going to have to create one permission set for each group of fields. For purposes of time, I've created 4 of the permission sets that we're going to be using today already, and those were over here for the EPA, the sales, and the NPS fields. I didn't create the permission set for advanced account metrics. So I'm going to walk through that really quickly because that's an important part of this, and I can hide that as well. So here I am, I'm logged in as me, administrator profile for the same org that I was just logged in as my profile test user at, and I'm going to go and start building out my, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, my permission set, sorry, for that advanced account metrics, which was the fourth set on there. So I'm going to go to setup, and I'm going to type in permission, and I see that administer, manage users, permission sets, there we are. And I've got all of these in here, EPA, NPS, sales, and I started this guy, the advanced account metrics, because it's fields that are on the account record. I'm just going to type in account in my search, see account settings, accounts shows up, and I'm going to hit scroll down here, sorry, and I should see, oh, I've already got that in there. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. Advanced account metrics, fields 1 and 2, those are already checked. So this permission set is ready to go. Oh, don't want to get ahead of myself there. Sorry. Okay, the next piece of the puzzle is quite simply creating a series of checkbox fields on the user object, because that's what we saw over here. These are checkbox fields, of course, that are on the user object because the user has to have access to these, and no one else has to can have access to these, because you don't want users toggling or untoggling access to things for each other or accidentally for each other. So, and I'll show you how we make sure that that doesn't happen in a bit here. But in any case, so to build out those fields on the user record, it's quite simply, I like to type in the word fields, and then you can see where all the different fields can be built out here. I'm going to scroll down to users, and of course I probably just whizzed right by it. Oh, for the love of God. Okay, I'm going to type in user, sorry. User fields, there we go. So just like any other object, and this is, I know, lower level admin stuff, so I've already gone ahead and built it, but it's the exact same thing as my point in showing you guys this. Advanced metrics fields, EPA fields, NPS fields, sales fields, and those are all these boxes themselves. Exact same way that you'd create a custom field in any other object is done also on the user object. And that's not something that a lot of people, especially newer admins, do. I mean, they don't realize, oh, I have the same kind of abilities with my user object as I do with, say, an accounts object. So, all right, after we've done all the easy peasy stuff, right, of monkeying with page layouts and creating fields, now comes the fun part. Now we get to make a Visualforce page. And we get to, we're going to first start out with making what's called a controller extension. That's going to be used on the Visualforce tab, where users will make their selections. While we won't get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details about the controller extension, I will walk through the major components of it and the page, the Visualforce page that we're going to be making. So, to get started with this, in order to create a one of the solutions components, the Visualforce tab, we need to create what's called a controller extension. And thankfully, because I am by no means a developer, Salesforce provides us with the exact code that we'll need as an example on developer.salesforce.com. And I'll include a link to that so you guys can see that as well when I publish the information here along with this. So what's a controller? For those of you that aren't familiar, a Visualforce controller is simply a set of instructions that specify what happens when a user interacts with the components specified in an associated Visualforce markup, such as when a user clicks on a button or a link, right? So here's how we're going to build the user controller extension that's going to allow us to create our Visualforce tab. So I'm going to go again into setup over here and build, develop Apex classes new. So I know what's at the end of that, so I can just type in Apex classes. Oh, there it is. As soon as this pulls up, I'll hit new. Oop. Shoot. I'm supposed to be in Firefox. I'm sorry. That's why it's not giving me the options. I thought it was goofy. Apex classes, there we go. Now I'm logged in as the admin. Got too many windows going. There we go. Now I've got new. You see that I already built this out, but I'm going to explain how it's done because it's just this simple. So on another one of my computer screens over here, I'm going to grab the code that I pulled off of developer.salesforce.com, copy that, quite simply paste it in there, and I'm going to hit quick save. And it's going to give me an error. I understand that because I've already created something that's named the exact same thing. But that's all that you have to do is the point in me showing you that. Let me actually go like this and pull up the page. Developer.salesforce.com. This is the exact user controller extension example that I'm putting in here. And all that I'm doing is I'm changing just a little bit the way that the standard controller for this object works. I'm going to leave it as it is. So point being, I've got it in here. It's ready to go, which means that I can move on to my next step. After we've got the extension in place, now I can create the Visualforce page that'll be used on our Visualforce tab. So I'm going to go ahead and just go again and say Visualforce, whoops, and this time I'm going to click on Pages. And you'll see that I've already got my Visualforce Chatter profile tab created in here, but I'm going to walk you through how to create it. If you've never created a Visualforce page before, it's actually really easy. If you've ever looked online at how to build a website, HTML gets in there. I mean, it's actually, at first I was very afraid to get my hands dirty with creating Visualforce pages. After playing around with it for a little bit, it's really straightforward, and I'm gonna prove that to you right now. So I'm gonna hit New. I'm gonna give it a label, of course, and for this one I'm gonna say it's just Visualforce Chatter Profile Tab, something like that. Actually, I'm gonna put 2 after that just in case I already built something similar to it. I'm going to make this available for mobile apps and Lightning Pages. And I've already got my code built out just for constraints of time purposes. I'm going to grab it again from my other page over here, and then I'm going to show you what it is. So I'm going to select all of this, going to get rid of all of that, and pop in what my code actually is. And I'm going to hit Quick Save. This is where any errors that may show up. Oh, there we go. Naming conventions. So if you've never done this before and you see yellow and red up top, especially if it's considering anything that's in the name field, don't freak out. All that means is that unlike when you create a new object or when you create a custom field, it doesn't automatically put the underscores in there for you. So you got to go back in and insert those. Oops, there we go. All right, quick save again, and that should get rid of that. Oh, invalid field, account show sales information. It's much like a formula editor in that it'll tell you most of the time really close to accurately what your problem is. However, it's not going to throw the cursor on the markup to show you exactly where it is. But so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time because we're already looking at 26 after the hour. But I want to tell you what the components of this are. So at the very top of this, we'll see that we start things out with what are called tags. So we've got a page tag, we've got an output panel tag, and we know that it's a tag because it's preceded and ended with these little caret things, right? And so we'll see at the very top, I've got the output panel. It's just an element that's a part of an Apex page. If you get into using Apex pages or Visualforce pages a lot, you will use this quite frequently. They're really handy and simple to understand. So we see hi, user first name, please indicate the field sets that you'd like to view on account records. Strong, this is right out of the HTML handbook, which means bold. Start the bold right here. Don't forget to hit save after making your selections. This is the end tag, and I know that because it's got the little forward slash. So it's going to make everything that's right here bold. After that, we end our output panel. So that's what it calls the top section that I'll show you here in a moment. And then we're going to get into page blocks. And page blocks are handy as heck because I get to surround something with buttons if I want, or I can change colors at this point if I want, add in some CSS at this point if I want. I can do a lot of stuff at the page block level. See, the very next thing that I'm going to do, though, in this example, is I'm going to put buttons in there, and it's going to be a save button. By putting in this one little line of code, I'm going to put in a button on top and on bottom of whatever comes between the page block buttons tags that I've got in here that will save because it says action equals save. Now the syntax, that's where I get hung up. But if you look at things from a very high level, you'll see that it kind of makes sense, right? If I'm going to start something big, it's going to be with an opening tag. If I'm going to end that thing, it's going to have a closing tag, and this little forward slash means that it's the closing or the ending of that thing. So what's the action? Save. Oh, well, that's pretty straightforward, right? It's the syntax that trip most people up when they're first getting started in this, and there's so much super helpful documentation out there. Don't give up. Keep going. You got this. And if you get stumbled on something as simple, especially like this, feel free to ping me. I'd be happy to try and help out. Otherwise, the success community is wonderful as well. That's where I learned a lot of stuff. So anybody that's familiar with HTML may recognize the table structure that's right here. The table is quite simply 6 columns and 2 rows. Now, if you've never worked with a table before in HTML or in Apex, you're probably going, how does he figure? There's 6 columns and 2 rows in there. Because remember, everything starts and stops with those little tags, right? So we just need to be able to interpret what those tags mean. So table, oh, okay, well, it's an opening table tag. There must be a closing table tag. It's right there. So everything that's between here is a table. Oh, okay, I get it. Rows. TR indicates a table row. TR with the / before it means that the table row is ending. And within those rows, we've got columns. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns in each of the rows. And then I just have to indicate what they should be. So you'll see vertical line bottom. Oh, I'm doing a little styling right here, and the editor is so nice as to make that green, so I know it's something different. The width, and then how much it's going to be, and then the value. And this is where it shows me user dot and then the name of a field. This is the API name of the custom field that I made, and I know it's a custom field because it ends with __C, right? So exclamation point user, that means user is the object. Dot, and then anything after that, dot, is the name of the field. Now remember how I said over here that we've got, this is the field, so advanced account metrics, the NPS fields, these are labels, and this is that table, mind you. There's 6 columns in here, and there are 2 rows. This is the field, this is the field's label. Let's see where that actually comes out in the markup. So I can see this is the field again, and so what's it going to be called? Oh, it's going to be called sales information. So the first row is, in this scenario anyways, I got it built out so that the first row, the first column is the actual field itself where you're going to put in the value, and the second column is actually going to be the label. So if I change this label, it'll change what is over here. Now that's important. You may be like, well, yeah, it makes sense. It's important to remember that because I can have anything that I want be in the label, and it won't affect what field is being edited here. So it's kind of neat in that respect. So at the end of it, I've got, I won't spend any more time on that. At the end of it, we have our closing page block, closing form, closing Apex page, and everything's all done, right? So this is the Visualforce page that you see right here. That's exactly what it is. That's the markup that we're just using. Okie doke. So after we've got our Visualforce page built out, we have to remember to grant access to the Visualforce page to users intended to see it. That is not something that happens automatically. So you're going to have to go into their profile, and the exact thing, path is, just going to punch in the word profile here, or I can misspell it. Profile, there we go. Once I'm here, I'm going to look for my profile test profile. That's one that I said that I was using for these examples. I come in, and from here, I can scroll down, down, and see, very near the bottom, enabled Visualforce page access. I've got to add it here. If I don't have it here, then the users that are assigned to this profile cannot access it. So, all right. Let's make a tab, shall we? So I'm going to punch in the word tab up here. You'll see that the path is build, create, tabs. I'll hit tabs. This is the Visualforce tabs section that we're going to add something to. I've already got it built out, but I'm going to show you how I did it. Very simple. I hit new. I'm going to select the Visualforce page that I want represented on the tab. I'm going to give it a label, and I'll say toggle fields 2, something like that. You'll notice when I hit tab out of that, it does automatically put in the underscores, unlike with the Visualforce pages, and then I can select a tab style. So if you've ever created a custom object, the same exact thing, right? I can give it a description. I'm going to opt out to. I'm going to hit next. And for today's example, I'm going to give everybody the same level of access to it. So these steps may seem pretty familiar to you because it's the exact same set of steps for other creation processes in Salesforce. And then I get to say which app I'd like to add this tab to. This is where we stop because I'm not going to actually add this to any of my apps. I'm not going to add this tab that I'm creating to any of the apps because I only want it to show up in this, which is considered a sub-tab app. So we're going to get to that in just a moment as well. I'm going to uncheck all of these and I'll hit save. There we go. All right, so I've got it created there. It's ready to be used and put onto my sub-tab app. So again, going to go over here, do some searching. Apps, there we go. Going to create it. And you'll see that down here, I've got sub-tab apps, and I've got two options. I've got others and self. Others is what other people see when they navigate to a user's profile. Self is what you see when you navigate to your own profile. So I'm going to edit self because we don't want anybody else to be messing with what I see and what I don't see. So because in the example over here, you'll see that I already had toggle field set up as a sub-tab app. It's already sitting in there. If I wanted to, I could also add that tab that we just built. Just click the right arrow, hit save. When I do that, come back over here, I'll hit refresh. Now I've got toggle fields and toggle fields 2. Right? I don't want to see it in there anymore, so I'm going to remove it. It might be a little confusing in a couple seconds here. Let me get rid of this, and I'll hit save. But that's as simple as that is. And I know I'm flying through a lot of this stuff, but there's going to be materials that get published along with this video. So in any case, bring on the automation, right? We have prepared everything that we need to prepare. We've set the stage and created the environment necessary for to be able to enable self-assignment of user permissions, right? There are two major components left to build out for this solution. One is a generic add permission set to user, and that's a headless flow. And then the second is another generic permission set to remove permissions, and that again is a headless flow. And then we're going to do the process builder processes that will invoke and pass variables to each of those when they're triggered, right? So we're going to start by creating our generic flows. The concept here is to use no more than two very, very simple flows to accommodate the assignment or unassignment of what could really be innumerable permission sets. Both flows are what's termed as headless, and that simply means that they have no screen elements or heads. Right? So headless flows wait in the background for something to trigger them, and typically they'll pass along a variable or two, much as we'll be doing next. So to get started in creating those, again, I'm in setup and I'm going to punch in flow, and you'll see build, create, workflows, and approvals flow. And I've got a couple of these already built out in here, but I'm going to show you guys how to make them, of course. That's why we're here. So I'm going to hit new flow. And first thing I have to do after this wakes up and remembers who it is that I'm going to do my best not to cough into the microphone. I'm sorry. We're going to create drag an element. Everything in here in the flow designer, is drag and drop. It's really quite intuitive. Not nearly as scary as I thought it was about a year ago. So the first thing that I want to do is be able to create a record. And why am I going to create a record? That's interesting question. Why am I going to create a record? The reason why we're using create record and then eventually we'll be using delete record elements for the assignment and unassignment of permission sets is because of how permission sets work under the hood. So you see, every time a permission set is assigned to a user, a permission set assignment record is created, and that indicates which user should be granted the permissions made available via said permission set. So that's what's actually happening when, in this scenario, we use a record create element. I'll drag this over here. Come on, there we go. Yeah, so in the next step, we're going to be creating, the variables that this headless flow or this screenless flow is going to be looking for. And it's going to say, I'm looking for something, which is going to be a process builder, to throw me the variables, which is who and what I should be assigning. And then when we do the delete, it's going to say, throw me the variables, show me the who and the what that I need to search for in a permission set assignment record, which is actually what's created every time you assign somebody a permission set. I go to user ABC and I assign them a permission set. In the background, a permission set assignment record is created, and it says this user gets this permission set. Got it. So in our delete that we're going to make next after this, it's going to say, okay, I need to find that exact combination of this user and this permission set. Once I find it, delete that record. And we're able to do that with Flow, and we do that with Flow because Flow is one of the only declarative solutions that we've got available to us that can delete records. Process builders can't do it. You can't do it with workflows. You can do it with Flow, though, deleting records. So that's why we're here. So I'm going to give this just a generic name, and I'm going to call it create record. Hit my tab button, and I'm going to say create standard. And I'm going to go all the way down, and we're going to be creating permission set assignment rules. Oh, come on. Now you're going to make me do this. Permission set assignment, there we go. Sorry, permission set assignment records. So we've got two fields on every permission set assignment record, the who and the what. So we've got to say field number 1, standard field. It's either going to be the assignee ID or the permission set ID. We want to leave these as variables because it could be used by anybody, right? So I'm going to say the assignee ID, and under value, I'm going to hit the drop down. I'm going to say create new variable. With the variable, I'm going to say assignee ID 3, because I'm pretty sure I've got a couple of those in there as well. The data type, it's an ID, so we can leave it as text. Input, output type, we don't have time to get into what the differences are, but we're going to do both input and output on this. And the default value to leave it open, we're going to hit 0. And I hit OK. Now we also have to say we got the who, now we got to get the what in there. I'm going to pull in my standard permission set ID, and let's make this another variable. So here's my variable, and I'm going to call this perm set ID, call it 3, whatever. I can give this a description. Best practice, you would give it a description. I'm not going to for time purposes. Data is going to remain, again, as text. It's an ID. And I'm going to go into input and output and give it another default value of 0. I hit OK, and I hit OK. That's it. I've got now a headless flow that's sitting there waiting for something. The only thing that I need to do is set a starting element. If I've got 15 or 20 different elements on the page, there's got to be one that is used to start a flow. If there's only one, you need to make sure that it's that one. The little green thing in the upper corner, you click on it, it's good to go. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to just call it Gen Create 1 Auto Launch Flow. Interview label. Okay, good. I can leave everything else as it is. I hit OK. Now it's going to give me an error. It says save as successful, and it's telling me in this error the create record is not connected to anything, which is perfectly okay. Why? Because this is a headless flow. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to be connected to anything, so we're safe to ignore those errors. I'm going to close it, and I have to close it now because this is where I activate it. I have to activate a flow before I can use it. So I'm going to click activate, and now it's ready to be called upon. It's ready to be passed along variables or invoked. Because we are looking at 42 after, I'm going to skip going over the delete one, but it's the exact same process. The only difference being is that instead of create record as our initial element, I grab the delete record element, and then I go through and I create the same set of variables. I go ahead and I put in the exact same default value of 0. It's exact same thing. The only difference is that you grab the delete record element instead. So everything's the exact same. All right, now that we've got our flows in place, and we've already got those over here, the last piece of the puzzle is the process builder processes that are going to invoke them and pass variables to them that they need to do their jobs, right? So this next part may seem like a lot, but it's really a matter of doing the same thing a bunch of times. So we've got 4 process builders. We're going to create one process builder. I've already created these. We've got one process builder process for each grouping of fields that we want to show or hide. And each of those process builder processes are going to have a what happens if the box is checked set of criteria, and what happens if the box is unchecked set of criteria. Let's see what those look like. So up here in setup, I'm going to say process builder. There we go. Let's take a look at one of these that I've already built out, just so I can give you an overview walkthrough of it. Here's the active one that I've got, the EPA, toggle EPA fields. You'll see that I've got an EPA true and an EPA false. Again, we've got EPA information is one of the page layout sections that contains the EPA fields. And that we created this user EPA field checkbox for, and so we have to make a what happens if it's checked, what happens if it's not checked. So at the object level, I select user, recursion is allowed, I look at the criteria, and I use a formula to indicate that this is true, right? So give it a name, EPA equals true, criteria for executing actions, formula evaluates to true. So I'm going to AND these two things together, and of course there are two different camps on this. The old school folks that like to do things like me, and I use the AND function. You can also directly after a first line get rid of that comma and put 2 ampersands, get rid of the second parentheses back here, and then it'll be this level ampersand, ampersand, and then the next level below it. You can keep going like that. I like to use this, both do the exact same thing. So I'm going to say in this formula, so on the user record, when the EPA field equals true or checked, and the prior value of it was not true, then this criteria will equal true, and it should carry out these immediate actions. That part's pretty simple. The immediate actions part is the part that most people haven't dealt with before, so let's take a look at that. This is actually calling on or launching a flow. So when I hit add action, and I'm going to do that for you in a moment here, when I hit add action or say add action, I'm going to have to give it a name. I'm going to have to indicate that it's a flow that I want to launch. I select my flow, and then I pass along a specific set of variables. So I've got this documented in the documentation that's going to go along with it. I forgot to mention it when I was talking about building the permission sets. When you're building those out, you have to keep tabs on what the IDs are of those permission sets. So everything, as you know, has a 15 or 18 character alphanumeric case sensitive ID that's generally available up in URL. So you navigate to a person or an account or whatever, you look for the 15-letter alphanumeric character ID and the URL. That's what I copied here and associated with each of these. That is important to do because we got to pass it along to these flows when they're invoked. So let's walk through what this actually looks like. I'm going to quite simply, purposes of time, I can do a new one. All right, I'm going to hit new, and I'll say test PBP, process builder process. I'm going to say the process starts when a record changes and hit save. My object, again, is user, so I'm going to type in user. And I'm going to say when a record is created or edited, and I'm going to allow recursion and hit save. Now for my criteria, I'm going to say EPA equals true. And again, I'm going to say formula evaluates to true. So we're going to go and this is not going to be as neatly formatted as it was before because I don't have time to put in all those spaces. I'm going to look up my field here. There we go, EPA fields. Oh, that didn't work out. EPA fields, there we go, choose, thank you. Oh, I hit it twice, I'm sorry. Maybe I hit it 3 times, I'm not sure. It's Friday. Okay, so equals true. And then I'm going to put a comma here, and I can actually grab this whole thing, copy it down there, and I'm going to put prior value for this field not equals to true. And then I can go ahead and I can put my closing parentheses on there, and I only want to execute these actions when the specified changes are made to the record. A little overkill, you might say, because I kind of have that taken care of in the formula with this one, but we're going to leave that checked anyways. All right, I'm going to hit save. All right, wonderful. There were no syntax errors. It didn't stop me or kick me out. Great, so we've got that one in there. We're going to add an action. And again, I'm going to select, I'm going to say flows, and I will say this is add EPA fields. So now I have to find an auto launch flow. Here's that one that we created, the generic create one. I can select that, and now I need to set the values for the variables that it's waiting for. So I'll hit the down arrow here, and I'll say I want to populate the assignee ID with a reference, and the reference value is actually going to be the user's ID. So I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and I'm going to select user ID and hit choose. And I have to get the other thing because we say who and what, right? So I'm going to add a row, select the other value to populate, and this one is I'm going to leave as a string, and that's where this comes in. So I'm going to copy from my documentation here the EPA permission set ID, paste it in there, and that's it. I'm done. So once I've got that in place, I can go ahead and do the second one, the EPA equals false, give it the exact same action, except use my delete record action, pass along the variables as it were, and hit save and activate. So again, I just did this for example purposes. Going back to viewing all processes, here's that one that was actually activated right now. You'll see that I got the EPA, the NPS, and the sales fields. So after all of those things are in place, holy cow, that was a lot. We have given our users the ability to check some boxes and see or hide what they want. Again, all that functionality boils down to this. User will navigate to their profile, their Chatter profile page. They'll look at a custom tab that we built out for them. They have no idea what's going on in there. They say, oh, I do want to see these fields. They hit save. They go over to their account record, they refresh it, and bam, here are all the fields that they've just shown them or opted to be shown. So one thing that I do want to point out is anytime that you're working with IDs in your sandbox, you have to remember that once you push them over into production, the IDs are going to be different. Your permission set IDs are going to be different, so you need to update the permission set IDs after you push things over into production. Otherwise, you're going to be like, why is this not working? The other thing to point out, while you can use headless flow for a lot of different things, it's important to remember that if users don't have the ability to read fields, they don't have the ability to read fields, right? So they can't access them in reports. They can't access them any place until they have that permission back. So if you use this scenario, you're going to want to explain to them, hey, if you hide it from yourself, you're removing access to that information. But it's important to recall, if you want it back, you just check a couple of checkboxes and you got it. So that's a ton of information, a ton of information. I've got it all built out here, actually in elements in this really cool detailed map that is going to be a tool I want to pass along to you guys. So if there are any questions on what I just covered, you got 3 people that are really smart and they're up here with me. Hopefully all 3 of them made it with me here. The 4 of us would be happy to answer anything that you may have.
Great, thanks, Ben. So the one question that we haven't answered yet is, I don't understand what sub-tab app is. Can you explain how this is used and where the user accesses it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So in Classic, like we've got apps, right? So apps are just a grouping of tabs, as I explain it, right? So if I click on Call Center, it's going to show me a different set of tabs. If I click on Content, it's going to show me a different set of tabs. A sub-tab app is actually a tab that's not up here on the regular or with the other tabs that are available. It's actually a sub or lower level tab that, and the reason why we use it is because we've got the ability to dictate what folks see when they're looking at when they're looking at us and what we see when we're looking at us. So putting it here, of course we can build Visualforce tabs. Remember, I opted out of adding that Visualforce tab to any of the apps because that would make it a regular tab. To make that Visualforce tab that we created a sub-app tab, we don't put it there, we actually have to go down to the sub app tab section on our user profile and make sure that we've included it under the self section. So excellent question. Regular tabs up top, sub app tabs are only available down below.
All right. What was the purpose of making the process builders recursive?
So in going in, so recursive means that it can do it more than once, right? And to be honest with you, as a best practice, after I do that to save on computing process, after I've made sure that computing power, sorry, after I've made sure that everything works, I will uncheck that. Typically, when I'm trying something new or I'm experimenting, that's a great point. It's a bad habit of mine. I check that by default because I want to make sure that what I'm trying or playing around with or testing, it's got every chance of happening because I want to see what happens, right? I'm being creative, I'm exploring a little bit, trying to figure things out. Recursive, typically, I'm sure as you know because you asked the question, means that, okay, I can try it a couple of times. So if it's triggered and then that makes something else change on the record, and then that makes something else change on the record, it may make it so that I could run that process again on the same record. We don't have that scenario here. It is a bad habit of mine, and thank you for pointing that out to me. I am trying to break myself of it, but there's no need to make that recursive. After I've proven out the functionality, I usually go back and undo that.
All right. Stuart asks, can you show your headless flow again? It seems small.
It was small, and I apologize for my minuscule headless flow. Let me show this here. So we will look at the add permission. So, oh shoot, again, I didn't open up Firefox, which is where my my admin user is logged in. Okay, flow here. Let's take a look at generic add permission set to user. All right, so quite simply, I'm going to hit edit. And on the guts of it, I gave it a standard name, which then gave it a unique name when I tabbed out of that. Create, I had to tell it what it was going to be creating, which is a permission set assignment. And remember, those are the records that are created whenever you assign a permission set to a user. You say, I want to give this specific user with this specific ID a specific permission set that has a specific ID. So that's the who and the what. That's why you've got to come down, and initially it just says field and value, and I added another field and value. That's where we're passing along our variables. So you make a selection here and you say, I want to fill the assignee ID whenever this thing is invoked with, and now because we're making it something, a flow that's reusable, it's headless, we used a variable. So we went through that create a variable process, and the variable is the running user's ID. So it's just sitting there. This flow is waiting to be called upon, invoked, which is what the process builder does, and then after you call over your buddy the flow, and it's like, hey, I'm here. What do I do now? I'm waiting for something, and then the process builder goes, oh, you needed to know who, and you needed to know what, and it's going to pass over the permission set ID, and it's going to pass over the assignee ID. And then it knows what to do. It's like, oh, okay, I know who to assign what. But that's it. They are super, super simple. You hit OK. I'm going to hit cancel. You make sure that you've got it set as your start element. You hit save, you hit close, and you activate it. And then it's sitting there waiting like your good little buddy, just ready to do your bidding.
All right, next question. Any way to get, and I think it's permission set to change that by name without hard coding IDs. So while Ben used the hard coding IDs piece, what you can do in Flow is if you pass from Process Builder the API name for your permission set, you can do a lookup on the permission set object by the API name and then get the ID. And then your next step would be to then do the record create. So that's how you could avoid the having the actual ID in your flow.
Yeah, and again, it's just personal preference. If you don't want to have to go back, and I'm assuming this is why the question was asked, if you don't want to go back once you push this over into production, because none of us are going to ever do this in production, right? We can't, because we can't create the extensions in production. In any case, we would simply just keep tabs of the API name instead of the record IDs.
So there's another question, but I'm not sure if I've already answered that based on the previous one, but the comment was, I was thus far confused about copying permission set ID and its usage. So let us know if you're still confused, or you can clarify what additionally you need to understand, and then we can explain that. And then the next one is, do you advise using Apex and Visualforce in Lightning experience?
Yeah, so there's that, right? Without getting too far into the weeds, which is partially because I don't want to get too far into the weeds, and partially because I'm not an expert on it, and we may need to pin it and get back to you on the success community and answer you there. But there have been, I'm hesitant to do it in Lightning because I've come across a couple of other Apex-related hiccups since the advent of Winter 17. There are a couple of known issues that are out there on the known issues section of the success community that are specific to Apex and Winter 17 release. I've been affected by a couple of those. So as it is, my org runs in Classic. I have not migrated over to Lightning. Some of our divisions are looking to do that. So again, we're going to be using permission sets to maybe do that over at our European locations. But we're all in Classic. So that's where the unknown part of this comes for me, because I haven't tried it. By all means, try it. Let us know how it goes. I'd love to hear if somebody gave this a whirl in Lightning, and I might go and try and do that this afternoon yet, but that's the unknown part for me, because I haven't tried it.
Yep, so that's it for all our questions. So Co, if you can go and post that same question out on the success community, if there are folks out there who have Lightning experience, I'm sure they'll comment on that as well. So with that, I know that there was a lot to consume, but once we post all the materials along with the deck and the recording, if you're listening to it again and you have questions, definitely go out to our success community, Salesforce Automation Hour, and post your questions. With that, thank you very much, Ben, for being our guest presenter, and we look forward for folks to joining us next week when we have MVP Melissa Van Dyke and Tyler Grimes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks all.